Happy New Year, everyone. I thought it would be a nice idea to present a message of hope and optimism as we go into 2018. And it's a radical message, and it is this. Most things are going to be mostly okay. That's my awe-inspiring prediction for 2018. Obviously, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but folks like me who are interested in politics and culture, we have obviously a lot of reasons to not think that. There's a lot of people who are frightened right now, unsettled, concerned about the direction of the country. So if you're interested in politics like me, you are likely to have noticed the rise of authoritarianism on the left and the right, the rise of identity politics, and it's quite a serious and substantial threat, apparently, against those basic values on which most of the good things about our civilization, our society, have been built. You may be increasingly concerned with the very loose relationship that many of our politicians have with the truth, and the non-existent relationship that they seem to have with their oaths of office and their commitments to represent we the people and protect our rights. I'm with you on all of those things. But as I said, it turns out that we generally overweight our current experience when we're predicting trends that actually play out over kind of historic time, maybe years or decades. And I'm not just making that up, by the way. There have been serious meta-analyses of predictions and forecasts, and we see this pattern over and over again, that, as it were, we're blinded by the here and now. So the warning here is, let's not overweight everything that's going wrong or apparently going wrong right now in our politics and our society. That's the first thing I want to say about that. The second thing is that our conscious minds are very limited when it comes to doing analysis. We are kind of stuck with making linear projections, linear calculations. The human mind can really only look at a few variables at a time and manipulate them in quite simple ways. Obviously, when you have a complex system with billions of variables, such as a country, and a lot of those variables are related to human beings with free will who don't even know what they're going to do tomorrow, what they're going to have for lunch tomorrow, regardless of how they're going to react next year to whatever the political climate will be, etc., etc. In such a situation, our limitation to predict linearly based on whatever facts we are attending to right now, which of course is never all of the facts and never all of the relevant facts, it's highly limiting, and it causes us to almost be able to guarantee that our projections will be wrong, or at least so incomplete as to be useless. And indeed, of course, most of the things that determine our experience, whether on a society-wide scale, but even in our personal lives, result from events that we can't predict. You didn't predict the person who you ended up marrying, for example. You didn't predict, let's say, the illness of the child that you may have had that has completely changed your life. That's, again, just on the individual level, but on a society-wide level. People didn't predict that Trump, they didn't predict 9/11. They didn't predict, one thing after the next. You get the idea. So we're making wrongly linear projections and predictions based on massively incomplete and largely irrelevant information, and the dynamics that govern a lot of what's going to happen in 2018 and the year ahead and all the years subsequent to that are hidden from our sight. So that means all bets are off. And I hope, in a way, that gives us, bizarrely, a cause for hope. If we find ourselves looking around and watching things have got worse in the short term in whatever respect we're concerned with, and making those negative projections. Our ignorance can be a cause for optimism. But more than that, I have another reason for being optimistic. Not only is it the case that we cannot make linear projections of most of the things that matter in our experience, in our country. Rather, the future is often not a continuation of a part of the past, but a reaction to it in many important respects. So obviously I've been writing increasingly and talking increasingly and speaking increasingly about this rise of authoritarianism, how authoritarianism on the left exacerbates that on the right, and vice versa, and how we're otherizing, right? We're, in other words, viewing other groups that we disagree with as intellectually or morally inferior, so that not only do we get to disagree with them, we get to essentially ignore their concerns. We essentially immunize our own worldview against whatever perspectives or conflicting experiences they may have for us to consider, because we want to protect our worldview and justify the way we treat those with whom we disagree. That's been getting worse and worse and worse. But it turns out that it's starting to hit a limit. And the reason I say that is, well, one of the reasons, a couple of months ago, CATO, the CATO Institute, put out a free speech survey, comprehensive report, in which they claim that 58% of all Americans feel unable to speak honestly about their politics and their political beliefs. They are scared, in other words, of being otherized by the community in which they live. Now, this includes folks on the left, in conservative communities, folks on the right, in liberal communities, such as university campuses, obviously being a classic example. Actually, campuses being an excellent example, because as per the CATO study, the fear that people have to declare their true political views in a campus environment has become very great. It's more than 58% are too scared to tell their political or social truths in the campus environment. I don't know if is it Herbert Stein's law, somebody's law, that if something can't go on, it won't. Well, that's where we are. We have a majority of Americans now who can't even have honest political discussion. That is not sustainable. And we are seeing the reactions against it already beginning. This is the pendulum beginning to swing back. I spoke to an African American law professor at a campus recently after I had been involved in a panel on identity politics, and I told a story about how, to indicate that I think the SJW phenomenon in places like the campus that is local to me has gone as far as it can go, in that mainstream Americans, whether they're Democrats or Republicans or neither, left-wing or right-wing, liberal or conservative, they're starting to think enough is enough. They're starting to think that this is not a good way to do politics. But they are not yet, in general, feeling safe enough to say that. Okay? So the sentiment is there that this has to end, this identity politics has to end, this taking offense at views we disagree with has to end, this equating speech with violence and all of that kind of stuff, it has to end. Folks across the political spectrum are kind of done with all of that. They're done with this quite aggressive way of doing politics, but they're not yet ready to say it because there hasn't been a political leader yet that's really made that safe, that hasn't got in front of this curve and said, you know what, I think enough's enough, and I think it's okay to have these views, and it doesn't make you whatever, xenophobe or racist or pick your accusation, a deplorable. But this isn't just a problem of the left or the right. This identity politics is a problem, has been increasingly a problem all over the political spectrum, and this way of shutting people down has been a problem. all over the political spectrum. People are dumb. And here's a big political opportunity, right? I guess this is my cause for optimism concretely. This presents a big political opportunity because at some point there's going to be maybe one or maybe a handful of politicians that get out in front of this and say, no, I'm not going to engage in this. I'm not going to pander to people who are going to loudly take offense at a view that I or other Americans have. I'm not going to be intimidated. It may not be a politician. It may be, an administrator at a university. And I think not only are I don't even want to say moderate because I think that doesn't do them justice, good thinking, well-intentioned Americans, not only are they finding each other, so let's say the moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans are seeing that they have this distaste for this aggressive, divisive politics in common. Not only is the pendulum swinging back in that way from this extreme politics, this identitarian politics, more authoritarian politics, but it's swinging back in a related but maybe even more important way, which is that when people get sick of doing politics this way, and this way means, identifying with this group or that group, with making big declarations, when they get sick of that and its ineffectiveness, they look to the micro. They stop listening just to what a politician says, and they start looking at how does that individual live his or her life. Is he decent, civil, dare I say it, even humble? We're going to see as this pendulum swings that these qualities, these human lived qualities, are going to become more important to people, and therefore more political success is going to attach to them. At some point, some politician is going to get ahead of that, is going to be that, is going to model that, or maybe somebody else in the public eye is going to model that. And then that 58%, CATO's 58% of folks that don't feel safe in being honest in their communities, among their friends and colleagues, are going to feel safe. Because you know what? Actually, an honest public figure that just calls out virtue signaling as just that, and actually puts outcomes, gets people focused on outcomes, rather than declarations that, identify them with one group or another. Such a politician who says, we've got to start measuring our compassion by the good that we do and not our intentions or our statements, that we've got to spend more time listening to people who have reason to think that they're right, rather than insisting that we're right. Those politicians are going to become more and more attractive as Americans get, as they have already become, more tired of this quite violent, emotionally violent, and in some cases physically violent politics that we've been seeing in America. So be optimistic. I don't know if this is going to happen in 2018. I think it might. It depends on leadership, whether we get any. But a person of conscience with brave, clear principles can remind us of this part of our nature. We may see very soon politicians starting to be valued not for their ideology, but for who they are. Public figures being valued not for their declarations, but for how they actually live, how they treat the people whose lives they touch. Really basic stuff, everyday stuff, more concrete stuff. I think it's going to happen. And it's going to happen because it's the yin and the yang thing, right? In one extreme is the seeds of the opposite. And I am going around the country talking to audiences, young and old, left wing, right wing. And wherever I go, I'm hearing this. I'm saying this. And they're going, yes. Well, CATO found that 58%, or said it to them, that enough is enough. Enough is enough. And if things can't go on, they won't. And so when the bad stuff stops, better things happen. Let's see. But don't fall into the trap of overweighting all the bad things that you're seeing today in projecting into the future. And don't fall into the trap of thinking that you can project a line carrying on, when it comes to a complex system like a country and its politics, in the same direction. Because you know what? It often works like this, right? Up and down, not all in a straight line. So yeah, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Here's to 2018 of increased civility, decency, humility. Well, hope springs eternal, doesn't it?